Welcome into Talking Sports with JP. Happy Tuesday morning, everyone. Week one of the college football season is behind us, and I don't know about you, but for 5 days straight, I was glued to the TV. Most of these games that we got to watch this weekend were no more than a scrimmage, a test run, if you will, for some of these offenses trying to see what the 2023 season was going to look like with the new quarterback at the helm. But by the end of the week, we were left with questions about who should and who should not be ranked in the top 25. And I also questioned myself, who should or should not be ranked in my top 7. So my 3 big takeaways from the weekend, number one is much like everyone else in college football. What the heck is going on in Boulder, Colorado? The Colorado Buffaloes upset TCU 45-42. They had a great offensive performance. The one thing that stands out to me the most is the fact that they only had a total of 55 yards on the ground. They're going to have to even that out somewhere along the line so they have more of a balanced offensive attack moving forward. But when you have four wide receivers over 100 yards, and then Shadir Sanders and Travis Mr. Do-It-All Hunter, that duo is going to make the Buffaloes near unstoppable. The number 2 story for me this weekend, we're going to stay out west with the Pac-12. They went 13-0 this weekend for a conference that isn't going to exist much longer. They refuse to go down without a fight. Question mark, though. Are they going to have the firepower or the defense to hang with the big boys of the SEC or the Big Ten come college football playoff time? And then number 3, a statement was made by 2 top teams and a 9-win team from a year ago in Duke in the ACC. Forget the SEC chants. What about the ACC chants? Florida State and North Carolina had something to say about that. And speaking of North Carolina, congratulations to Mac Brown on reaching his 100th win. It was on the back of a Gene Chizik-led defense that had 9 sacks and only gave up, I say only, -2 yards on the ground. The top half of the ACC is looking really good in week 1. Now, let's get into my top 7 and how they performed this weekend. Up first, the Georgia Bulldogs. They pulled away with a 48-7 victory over the UT Martin Skyhawks. The offense struggled, and I expected that. But calm down, Dog fans. They'll be all right. It's hard to say this versus a team such as UT Martin, but Georgia had to wear down that Skyhawk defense before they were able to get some big plays going. I get it, Georgia. You got 5 new players on the offense, including starting quarterback Carson Beck. You have 3 new players on defense. But that's not an issue here because that side of the ball just simply reloads talent. Beck went 21 of 31 with 294 yards and 1 touchdown. The team ran well, but there was no player over 55 yards individually. Brock Bowers, he's a tight end, but is he really? Bowers was the leading receiver on the team with 77 yards. There were 3 fourth quarter scores by Georgia that made that final score look more like what we all expected it to look in the long run. But if you watch that game, you were left wondering, much like myself, is Georgia going to have the offense to keep up with teams in the likes of Tennessee and most likely the way it looks right now, Alabama in an SEC championship game? We all know their defense is great, but that offense right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be good enough to win a shootout. My number 2 team this week is the Michigan Wolverines. And the story is a 30-3 win over East Carolina without head coach Jim Harbaugh. But is it really? Short of Appalachian State in 2007, this would have been the biggest upset in the Big House if they didn't win. My biggest takeaway is the turnover on downs at the end of the third after a J.J. McCarthy fumble on 4th and goal. And then the other one is that big old 0 on the scoreboard in the fourth quarter. The difference between the first and second half team was clear. Michigan should have ran away with it, but they just seemed to stall. McCarthy's numbers look good, 26 of 30, 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. Blake Corum looked great coming off of that knee surgery with 73 yards on 10 carries and a touchdown. He had 2 long runs of 37 and 21 yards. My number 3 team this week is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They pulled off a 23-3 victory in Bloomington, but Ohio State fans, much like myself, have to be asking at halftime, what is going on with this team? Are you worried about the quarterback situation? I kind of am. But you have to think about it, there was more than just that. Pass protection sucked for Kyle McCord, and so he was just good enough to beat Indiana with 0 touchdowns in week 1. How is that possible when you have the best receiver in the country in Marvin Harrison Jr.? That man had 2 catches for 18 yards and no touchdowns. McCord and him will have to get together, or Devin Booker might just get the opportunity, or Devin Brown, pardon me, might get his opportunity sooner rather than later. All right, I'm going to say this out loud. Is Ryan Day on the hot seat? I believe it might be just a little bit warm. If he managed somehow to lose to Michigan 3 years in a row, that seat is going to get really, really hot. The only way that I would see him getting out of that situation is somehow Ohio State is able to backdoor the way back into the college football playoffs, but they would have to win it all. Just getting there wouldn't do it. Side note though, this goes to Michigan and Ohio State fans. It's just week 1. It's okay to have a struggle win week 1, maybe even week 2, but this past Saturday's performance, it can't be there after week 3 and 4. Once you roll into the Big Ten conference schedule, you're going to have to play better on both sides of the ball. My number 4 team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. They played host to Middle Tennessee State. And you can say what you want about the competition level. Everybody played that level except for a handful of teams. Alabama played as if they were in mid-season form from start to finish. All I heard going into the season was Alabama doesn't have a quarterback. Why do you have them so high, let alone winning it all? Is it because you're a Bama fan? Well, no, it's not. It's because I truly believe that this team can win it all. And as for that quarterback situation, I think Jalen Milroe answered all the questions on Saturday night. I even talked with a few of my buddies prior to the season starting, prior to last Friday when he was announced QB1. Didn't I call it? I said that if there was no clear number 1, if no one has taken that position and said, it's mine, then go with the best athlete, right? And the opening drive proved that. With that fumbled snap, no problem. 21-yard scramble for a touchdown. And then you go on in your second start in college football and have 5 total touchdowns. Oh, yeah. Each one of the backups came into the game and they had a touchdown rush as well. Hey, coach, look at me. I can do it too. That's all I heard from my wife every time each one of those guys scored on Saturday night. The defense was as advertised, and the icing on the cake was those 2 takeaways. Number 5 for me is USC. I assume even I'm going to get tired of saying this every Saturday, but once again, it was the Caleb Williams show. He went 18 for 24, 319 yards and 5 touchdowns. His backup came in, Miller Moss, and he threw for another touchdown. The stat that stands out the most to me, though, is 5 different receivers got into the end zone. Throw in 200 plus yards on the ground, and how do you defend this type of an offense? How can anyone keep them out of the end zone? The defense did manage to improve, only allowing 14 points to the Wolfpack. One score both on the ground and through the air. Through the air, though, they did allow 311 passing yards. They're going to get a little bit better there because when they come time to see Washington and Michael Penix Jr., he might just shred them apart. The marquee matchup of the weekend between my number 6 and number 17, FSU and LSU. This game can be summed up in 2 words: statement game. Florida State looked like the Noles of old, making Clemson fans worried that ACC crown might just be passed on. Jordan Travis accounted for 5 touchdowns on a 23 for 31 night, throwing for 342 yards. Florida State has weapons to spare. Johnny Wilson, an almost 900-yard receiver returning from last year. Keon Coleman coming over from Michigan State in the transfer portal, who was their top pass catcher a year ago. He hauled in 9 catches, 122 yards, and 3 touchdowns. There was one other key addition in the portal, and that was Jaheim Bell, a tight end from South Carolina. He blocked, he caught, he ran, and he also scored a touchdown himself. Come the end of the month, when Clemson and Florida State square off, it could just be the beginning of the end for Dabo, if it hasn't already begun. As for LSU, Brian Kelly called this game a, quote, ultimate failure. That's after earlier this week when he was quoted as saying, we're going to beat the hell out of Florida State. There's a lot there to get fixed on the defensive side of the ball. They allowed 480 plus yards. The key stat for me that stands out the most is that they allowed 8 of 13 conversions on critical downs. How do you go into the half up 3 and get outscored 31-0 in the second half? The offense looked good on paper. They had 450-ish yards, but just 3 touchdowns. That offensive line has to do better. They allowed 4 sacks. If Jaden Daniels can't stay standing, then the scoreboard will fall flat itself. But don't worry, Tiger fans, it's not over with. All you have to do now is win out, which means in November winning in Tuscaloosa, and if everything irons out in your way, beat what most likely would be the Georgia Bulldogs in the first week of December. So you're saying there's a chance. Well, technically, yes, I'm saying there's a chance. As for my first 2 out this week, well, one of them is definitely out this week. Clemson is out of the playoff hunt, and it's only week 1. Well, I don't know if they're out of the playoff hunt, but they're at least out of my top 7. If they don't get it right over the next 2 weeks with Charleston Southern and FAU, week 4 against Florida State is going to make them the laughing stock of the ACC. And as for Penn State, they played West Virginia week 1 and came away with a victory. But how about Drew Aller, their new quarterback? He went 21 of 29 with 325 yards and 3 touchdowns. There was a combined 146 yards of rushing on the ground. If they can tighten up their rush defense, they're going to give Michigan and Ohio State a run for their money. Well, that wraps up my week 1 recap. There was a lot of action that took place spread out over 5 days, and it was a lot of fun. Come back later this week as I give you a preview of week 2. Don't forget to follow me on all social medias at JP21Sports. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe somebody wants to come on and join me and help debate whose team should be where or where teams shouldn't be. Till next time, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you later this week.